Hi, I'm DJ Werq. On this episode of the Cyber Gizmo, we're going to be looking at Fedora 36 Workstation right after this. So Fedora Workstation came out, well, it should come out today, according to their schedule. This is April the 26th, 2022, at the time that I'm making this video. Let's talk a little bit about this. It's an interesting release, but a bit disappointing, to be honest. Let's first talk about the overview of what is actually inside of this release. So, Fedora versions are released about once every 6 months or so. Fedora supports each version for up to 13 months, and the reason for that is that allows you to skip a version if there's something in this one you don't want. You can wait and join up with the next one. But, you know, as with all things, release schedules are just never quite a certainty. You never know what kinds of problems you're going to run into, how much testing it's going to actually take to complete it. And Fedora always publishes their release schedules, which is pretty extensive. They'll start back even before they actually start turning code. So if you're interested in what's going on with 36 or 37, you can find out. The release schedules are on their website. So what do you need to actually run Fedora Workstation 36? So the first thing it needs is, as for a minimum, you need at least a single CPU with 1 gigahertz of frequency, 2 gig of memory, 20 gig of disk space, and they recommend a 1024 by 768 display. Also, they actually recommend a 2 gigahertz dual core CPU or better, 4 gig of memory. Now, I would say you actually need 8 gig because I was running into thrashing at 4 gig and trying to do very much with it. So thrashing is a condition that happens with systems like with multi-processing systems, where as you start to approach 90% of your memory use, the system performs more and more work to shuffle things in and out of memory, and at some point you reach the tipping point where all it's doing is moving stuff in and out of memory, and it's not spending much time executing code. That's usually referred to as thrashing. So yeah, I didn't see that indications of that at 8 gig, but at 4 gig, after running for a while, I started seeing that. It needs 20 gig of disk space, and again, the 1024 by 768 screen resolution. The kernel that they have elected to support in their release is 5.17. So probably the first thing we ought to do is talk about what's in 5.17. So one of the things that we've had in our file systems for quite some time is ID map mounts, but we've never had the ability to do recursive ID mounts. So what the heck is that? Well, if I'm let's say that I'm creating a file system where I have multiple users that might be sharing it. In this case, I would have to go mess around with ownership and ACLs in order to be able to grant permissions correctly to those two users. Well, in this case, I can efficiently change the ownership on a per mount basis without having to recursively chown all the files. So so that is kind of an interesting idea, and one that I have not seen before, but it was implemented for 5.17. Also, you have BPF, which is the Berkeley packet filters. You have CORI, which is compile once, run anywhere support. So everywhere support, I should say. So yeah, so you don't have to necessarily recompile it now to be able to use it. There's also a new AMD P-State driver, and that allows the AMD CPU frequencies to be managed using CPPC instead of ACPI. Has a finer grained mechanism for managing AMD frequencies. So if you are overclocking your machine, your steppings between frequencies are closer together, so you can get it closer and closer before the system tips over and doesn't run anymore. There's a new random number generator. They have replaced SHA-1, which of course has been expired since 2016, and with Blake's 2 algorithm. The network file system cache has been rewritten It sounds to me like we're making code changes to simplify things here. It doesn't look like they have made any real improvements to it. But there are mitigations for straight line speculation attacks, and so I would look for some detuning to occur, some performance decreases because of that. There's also support for the new ARM CPUs. So, all right, so let's talk about Fedora Workstation changes for just a moment here. So as we said, it's Linux kernel 5.17. It is based on GNOME 42. There are some changes from the Deja Vu font to Noto font, and you'll probably notice that same change in Ubuntu as well. The RPM package database is being moved from var to USR or user. The reason for that change is to maintain consistency with OpenSUSE, Kinolite, and Silverblue. And of course, though Kinolite is the KDE version of Silverblue, and Silverblue is the GNOME version, which allows for immutable file systems and also uses the OS tree RPM base. So you'll find your packages there are going to be over in USR anyway. Wayland is the default, and the NVIDIA drivers are supported in the version of Wayland that Fedora is using. There's a number of desktops. There is now Fedora calls these, typically they call them spins. So we have KDE Plasma, which is based on 5.24. We have XFCE, which is 4.16, and LXQT, which is now on version 1.0. And then, of course, GNOME 42, which we've talked about that before. But some of the other toolchain modifications, PHP 8.1 is now current on Fedora 36, Ruby on Rails 7, OpenJDK 17, although you can put newer versions on, as we've discussed before with Ubuntu. Django 4.0, the GCC is version 12, and glibc goes to 2.35. Golang is at 1.18. OpenSSL is now 3.0. Ruby is at 3.1. Ansible is at 5. And I probably should tell you that you'll probably find some, in some of your versions that you're down on 2.8 or 2.9, and then you're thinking, wow, I'm way behind. They actually reversioned that, so it's the next release, so don't worry, you haven't skipped a whole bunch of them. Firefox 96, LibreOffice 7.3 for some of that. Some of the other changes is Cockpit has added the file sharing item support for SMB and NFS, trying to make that a little easier. Podman 4, this is the first time that Podman 4 has moved over to the Fedora Workstation, so that's now been made available. Now, Stratus may not be of interest to you, but it is to me. Stratus is a file system it is slated for Red Hat, and it is a copy on write file system, has snapshots and versioning and yada yada yada. But it is still not to a point where, now, like I've said before, it's only, 3 years old now. So, yeah, I mean, it takes a while for file systems to go through the chain. And, so it has many improvements, a lot of fixes, and, and some performance enhancements as well. So I guess the first thing that we should do is to do the installation. So let me go set that up, and I will be right back. Okay, so I don't want to do a test, so we'll just go ahead and do a start. I don't think Anaconda does take a while to come up. That's the way it is. So, all right, same kinds of things we always do. Center some of this. Yeah, I know. The world will collapse if I install this. So it's simplified now from some of the previous versions that you may have seen. They made some assumptions that the first user, they'll collect that information when we sign on as to what user there is, and then root is automatically disabled. So, all right, so all I got to do is just drop into the installation. It's 10:26, and I will be back when this is finished. We're all done. It is 10:30 now, so about 4 minutes to install. Yeah, I know, it says 11:30 here, but it thinks I'm in Eastern time, so we'll fix that. So we're all done, and you will notice one thing that Fedora does not do. You'll notice it isn't restarting. So it defaults to letting you go back to play with the live, and that's just the way it is. So we'll go ahead and just restart it. There should be a pop-up now. Yeah. So you can start the setup, which, yes, we'll want to do that. No, you don't need my location. No, you don't need this. Yes, I do want third-party repositories, please. And yeah, we'll skip that. Okay, we're all done. And then you should get the tutorial screen that should pop up here in a second. There we go. So if you want a walkthrough of all the features of GNOME 42, you can do that. And as I said before, this is a complete GNOME. Now, let's just drop out of this. So this is the default workspace. So this is your app view now, and as you probably have noticed during the last few releases of GNOME, this gets smaller and smaller every time. But you know, you still have the ability to stack icons and group them, all those kinds of things that you normally would. Also, we'll want to change our appearance here a bit, and let's see what we have for choices. So let's get this up to a little bit higher. One thing I noticed that on Fedora, the system will crash. Now, this might be just a problem with the beta going to 1920 by 1080. At least on this machine, it does. So, and of course, I am running in a VM. All right, let's go ahead and keep the changes. That looks good. Yeah, we can look at the about, and it's showing. This is all GNOME 42. There isn't any differences, and as you can go back. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because I already did a video on GNOME 42, so I'll put a link here for you if you're interested in all the changes for that. So instead, what I'm going to do is my usual. Let's go ahead and add that, pin this to the dash, and get this a little bigger so we can work down here in the command line. So the first thing is, well, actually, the first thing I should do is I'm at release candidate 7, so even this is a early release of 5.17. So let's go ahead and do an update. Okay, so we're done with the install. Whoops. I want to come back up here and install a couple other things. I think I can get glances. Let's see. I think they have moved that into the repo now. You can see that it has changed my background. So I'm going to change it back because I don't really like that one. So let's see what we got. We'll look at a few things first that I'm interested in looking at. So there's our updates as usual, and let's see how they handle things. So these mean that it's installed already. I should be able to look at my software repos, and you'll see that the Flatpaks is in here. If you want to include the ones that are testing, you can do that. As far as the base repos, I should have added the third-party ones. Let's see. Yeah, there they are. And it's already set up for FlatHub, so you don't need to do anything with that. But let's see what it actually does. So yeah, it's defaulting to the RPM, the package, but then you can select Flatpaks if you want them. I prefer the way they're doing this over the way Ubuntu is doing theirs. So yeah, it defaults to the package. Let's just see if that's true for all of them. Let's try Geary. Yep, that's going to the package first. Oops, I keep clicking off of it because I don't use, those of you that know me, I don't use graphical user interfaces very often. Yeah, it looks like it's pretty consistent. Yep. So I'll let you play around with that version of the operating system, since I did see it come down with a new one. We're on a FC release now, so we're at 17.4. Let's see how much disk we are taking. 6.2. Since I've been messing around with this is going to jump up again. So let me just reboot this again. All right, let's see what we got now. 897, jumping up just a little bit. There's probably some things still starting up in the background. And now it's coming back down. So we've got 120 tests, 291 threads. Yeah, 86. Some things are, looks like some things are running. So let's see what else we can find out. There's probably quite a few packages. 1785 now. Yeah, let's see. Those should be just the ones I just, oops. My K is not working. There we go. So it's just the extensions and the platform is all I have currently here. Podman is a compatible version of, oops. I shouldn't have to give it anything, and then it's going to pick Fedora 36 as the default. I'll go ahead and let this do it. Podman is a compatible, command-compatible version of Docker, and it has some of the changes in it that Docker has not made and doesn't seem to be likely to make it. So we'll go ahead and enter this. So this is a container. If you're not familiar with Silverblue, this is a container which shares your home directory. So any changes you make here, this allows you to go ahead and install compilers, libraries that differ from the ones that are out in your main system, so that you can then create these toolbox containers, do your development on that, and have your own environment that's protected from any changes on the system. And in turn, any changes you make inside the toolbox prevents you from making any changes to the main system as well. So it protects you from the main system, and it protects the main system from you. And then you can just, when you're done with your development, you can, whenever, here, I'll show you, we'll just make a file here. And then I'll exit the environment. We'll see. Well, first of all, there's J. I'll exit. Now you'll notice the purple dot disappears. That indicates you're inside of the toolbox. This indicates you're on the system. So you'll notice that J is right here. It keeps it in sync with your home directory. So you can still maintain your software code in your main home directory, and you can change it inside the toolbox. So it really kind of makes things handy for you. Podman has very similar command structure to Docker, but this is the one that Red Hat has moved to, also Silverblue, and now Fedora. So again, I have been running some things, and the system memory has gone to 1.25 gig. You can see it right there. And again, Fedora was the first one to do this, where they don't display your home IP address, which is the default normally in glances. I always like this because this really gives you a nice dashboard view of the system. It shows you your network traffic, the number of IP connections, the drives that you have, and what their state is currently. Now this is just taking occasional snapshots So yeah, it's not accumulating or anything. It's just this is what's going on. And then you have your task list here, and then your overall information about the system and how busy it is and so forth. So yeah. Now I'm running this check. And I'll be back when this is done. So yeah, we don't have IP tables configured. That's normal, as you know. I'm just going to go through this real quickly. Yeah, I don't have fully qualified domain hosts. I don't have a DNS that's configured properly. Banner system, and then some applications. So Harding, it is finding compilers, and we have a 69 score. So that's not horrible. That's not bad. 271 tests and 2 plugins. So yeah, it's not bad. As far as the rest of the system is concerned, for those of you who are not familiar with Fedora, Fedora is the playground, if you will, for Red Hat to determine the suitability of changes that go into the upstream releases. So typically the Red Hat team does their development and they're playing around in the Fedora environment. So there's a version of Fedora for the desktop. There's a version of Fedora for the server. There's an IoT version where you can develop systems for embedded work or automotive or any of that kind of stuff. And then fourth, there's a version of Fedora for CoreOS, which would be a container version of Fedora. And those all roll up into, the first place they would roll up is into CentOS Stream. And then they start to build out the test environment there for what they're going to move into Red Hat. And then Stream then goes into Red Hat, and Red Hat gets released as their flagship product. So for both the server and workstation, yeah. And also have IoT and CoreOS versions up there too. Some final thoughts. So ButterFS, and I have proven this, and you'll see it again today, is not a good choice for a root file system. Now, you may have reasons that you need to use it, but you'll see from the performance statistics that when you have F reads, F writes, P reads, and P writes, which are pretty common on root file systems. I mean, they're probably going to be 90 to 95% of the workload that's going out on your root file system. ButterFS is a poor performer. My suggestion is don't use ButterFS for your root file system. You can do what you want, but that's my recommendation. It's not a good choice. The two choices that are good, XFS, which used to be the default file system for Fedora, is much better at handling a root file system, and ext4 is excellent in handling root file system workloads. I'll put a link to my benchmarks on file systems, and I'll have benchmarks here that will show exactly the same thing that's going on because it tests the root file system. Other than that, I think it is Fedora has always been a competent release, but you have to remember that you will have surprises that occur during the cycle of running Fedora, and those surprises will be they do change the kernel occasionally, and the closer you get to a release cycle, you'll find that your versions of Fedora will start to break. In the years that I ran on it, I mean, I've used Fedora since version 4, and as recently as a year and a half ago, moved over to Debian because I just needed, because of these videos. I didn't care before if it broke. That was fine. I could roll it back. but I just don't have time to do that anymore. So I'm probably, in all honesty, I've been saying this for years, I'll probably eventually move over to Silverblue, because at least there I have a version control system of some kind that I could easily roll the system back to a known working state. So yeah, so that's my final thoughts for today. It is, I think that it has a really nice release as always. On to the benchmarks, and let's take a look at those. I am not going to talk through them. There's no reason to do that. Each one of the benchmark groups is plainly labeled as to what it tests. So read the screen. You don't have to have me to lead you through it. If you're interested in the methodology of why I chose that, I also have a video on that. So I'll link those below, and you can take a look at those. Hope to see you next time. Please like and subscribe. Check out the benchmarks, and bye for now.